We're joined this morning by Dvir Abramovich. Dvir is chairman of the Australian Anti-Defamation Commission and actually spearheaded the Banning the Swastika campaign in the first place. Dvir, very good morning to you. Nice to talk to you.
Likewise, good to be with you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Dvir, how should people look at this in Western Australia? Is it a freedom of speech issue, or does it go deeper than that?
It's certainly not a question of freedom of speech. It's more about hate speech. And I think we have to remember that anyone who is wearing or displaying the Nazi swastika is plunging a dagger into the hearts of Holocaust survivors. They're spitting on the memory of the courageous diggers who sacrificed their lives to defeat the Third Reich. And it's also the modern face of Hitler. The Nazi swastika has been weaponized by neo-Nazis and white supremacists who are using it as a rallying cry to celebrate the murderous legacy of the Third Reich, and we have to send a very clear message. And I think it's an opportunity for the Western Australian government and for the Attorney General to be on the side of the angels and to send the unmistakable message to those who are inflamed with virulent bigotry. The law is no longer on your side.
Well, look, can I tell you, we asked for the Attorney General here in WA to come on the program this morning and give our listeners an idea of what he's thinking as the state's first law officer and whether or not it's even being considered. Unfortunately, he's unavailable all week, we're told, but the Attorney General here has been well and truly frozen in terms of his media appearances because of embarrassment over the Clive Palmer, Mark McGowan defamation issue. So that's been clouding quite a few things. But if you could talk to him directly, Dvir, what would you say to him?
Well, I would say to him the following, that a democracy is not just about the rights that we have. It's also about what we are willing to tolerate. And the Nazi swastika is not who we are as a people. It's a symbol of pure evil. And it violates the core values of respect, equality, and freedom that we cherish. And it is a stain on the Western Australian community. And this is a moment of opportunity for the government to decide who we are as a people and about the country that we want to live in. And we don't need to waste time on politics. This is the time to close the lid on this issue and to honor the legacy of the 6 million Jews and millions of others that were murdered by Hitler. I think that it's important to remind people what the Nazi swastika represents, because that's often forgotten in this debate.
Yes.
It's the shooting of 1 million unarmed Jewish civilians in 1941. It's the gassing of nearly 3 million Jews in death camps. It's the murder of more than 70,000 German citizens who had been diagnosed with mental and physical disabilities. It's the killing of the Roma and the homosexuals and political opponents, and really a war that caused more than 50 million deaths. The Nazi swastika does not have any place in Western Australia. I call on the government to immediately stop talking and to act as the Victorian government did. And it will be a thunderous blow to those forces of evil who are trying to keep Hitler's legacy alive here.
Dvir, in practical terms, how does the law work in Victoria in the way it's being framed in New South Wales? As I understand it, it's a maximum of 12 months jail or $11,000 fine for an individual. Victoria, I think, is $22,000, but the same jail time, potentially 12 months in jail, if you just display the Nazi swastika in public.
Correct. And there are, by the way, appropriate exemptions for the use of the Nazi swastika in education, art, and films is exempt. It recognizes also the cultural and historical significance of the swastika for the Buddhist, Hindu, Jain, and other faith communities. And it also allows for religious and cultural context. But let's be very clear about this. The only people that are using the Nazi swastika are white supremacists and hardcore bigots and final solutionists,
yes,
who would like nothing more than to march people like myself into the gas chambers. They dream of an Australian Hitler. They dream of a Fourth Reich. And in their warped Aryan worldview, anybody who's different, people of the Asian community, Indigenous Australians, members of the LGBTIQ+ community, will all be exterminated in a race war. These are very dangerous people. These are domestic terrorists in waiting, ticking time bombs. Now, banning the Nazi swastika is not a magic bullet, but at least it sends a message that we as a community will not tolerate our garden of democracy being infected with the weeds of intolerance and bigotry.
Do you know how far Queensland and Tasmania are away from doing the same thing? They say they've pledged to do it, but what does that mean in practical terms?
Look, I think that there's a strong realization now that even though this is a long journey, it's one that is worth taking, and that each state now following Victoria. When I started this campaign 5 years ago, there were a lot of skeptics and cynics who told me it will never happen. But I knew that ultimately the Australian people always do what is right and what is true. And it is a day, I think, when the Western Australian government eventually and the Tasmanian and the Queensland government will pass those laws. It will be a day for the history books. And it will be a day where we can all be very proud of being Australians, because the Nazi swastika violates and vitiates every ideal and every value that we share.
Dvir, thank you very much for talking to us today. We'll wait and see what the West Australian government do, what they say and how they respond. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks again for the opportunity. Thank you.
Dvir Abramovich, Chairman of the Australian Anti-Defamation Commission. He helped spearhead that campaign, very successful one in Victoria. That's resulted in a law being made to ban it, 12 months in jail or a $22,000 fine. New South Wales, the law going through the state houses today, and 12 months jail as well, $11,000 in personal fine, so half the amount of money. However, New South Wales, I noticed, going one step further. So corporations who display the Nazi symbol will be slapped with a $55,000 fine. What do you think? Should we go the same way here in Western Australia? 133 882.